So moving on with chapter 2, Krishna is very kind as a teacher. He is correcting Arjuna's thoughts that, you know what, don't lament over the temporary, focus on the permanent. That means don't lament about the material body that is anyway dead, but focus on the soul that makes it alive, the conscious being that activates this body. And while he's taking Arjuna through this process, Krishna tells him, look, one who has connected with me, one who has even slightly walked in this path of transcendence, in this path of spirituality, is relieved from the biggest fear. What is that fear? Fear of what happens after death. I have been close to death as a child. I used to have asthma and I wouldn't be able to breathe. I would go run to the window and try to get some air. And one day I remember I was lying on the sofa on my mother's lap and everything is becoming dark, and I felt this is what death looks like. I was not able to hear clearly, I was not able to see clearly, I wasn't able to breathe, and I could see that I am dying, and it was very fearful. And the thought that came to mind was, what's next? My parents won't be there wherever I'm going next. I don't know what it's like. Oh my God, what is it that's going to be? And that's the biggest fear that every human being have. We think it's death. We think it's the pain of death. It's actually the time of death, the next destination. And Krishna is saying you're relieved of that fear when you are walking in the path of spirituality. And he later on says that one who has taken any progress in this path of spirituality gets a human life for sure, where he can continue where he left off. Unlike, for example, Newton or Einstein, these people are so knowledgeable, but when they take another birth, if in a human body, they will be starting from ABC 1 to 3, right? And that's how it goes, materially speaking, material knowledge. But spiritual credits and spiritual knowledge and spiritual activities, that doesn't start from zero. You start where you left off. So Krishna is guaranteeing, you know what, even if you don't complete in this birth, it's okay, next life you can continue on. But please understand, Arjuna, that focusing on the temporary and crying over it is not going to be beneficial. You need to make some hard choices here. What is beneficial eternally for your soul? And that's how Krishna takes Arjuna from one step, from the material consciousness to spiritual consciousness. And he talks about the mind. He talks about karma. So he talks about why things happen to us. People say bad things happen to good people and good things happen to bad people. How is it their fairness? Is the system just? And Krishna says that it's karma. It's what you do is what you get. And not just what you do in this life, but what you've done in the past that determines what circumstance you're faced with now at this moment. And at this moment, you have a choice to make. And that choice is going to create your future. For example, if I decide to go to the gym, I might get some biceps, some abs. I might have a very different body, which is more attractive than my current body. So I have the ability to right now make a choice, and my future might change a little bit. So every moment we are making choices. When we think we are not making choices, to not make choice is also a choice. But then we think somebody's born on the streets, somebody's born in a royal family. How does that work? How is it fair? What is the child's fault? And that's what Krishna is talking about, of transmigration of the soul. That just like you change your clothes, a little baby becomes a boy becomes a youth becomes a middle-aged person, and then senior, and then old and dwindles and dies. Then what? Once this body is not usable, then the soul moves on to another body according to one's karma and one's desire. So if you desire to sleep a lot, for example, you might get a bear body. A bear is sleeping 6 months a year, is hibernating. Or you like to eat a lot of certain kinds of things, you might be born in a certain kind of animal body that likes to eat that. So your desire is satisfied. So it's not a system where you're punished. It's a system where you're awarded. Krishna gives you what you want. Sometimes the human body is not the right body for our desires, and thus we're given another body. We cannot fly in this body. We cannot eat raw meat in this body. We cannot swim like a fish all the time with this body. This body has certain ways that we can be using. But if we have those kinds of desires, then there are 8.4 million species of life according to the Vedic classification that Krishna talks about, that we can take birth in and experience those kinds of lifestyles, experience life from those vantage points. But in this human form of life, the only form of life where we have the ability to ask questions and to find those answers. Why is there injustice? Why does good things happen to bad people? Why some people are very intelligent and some people are not? Why is a child born blind? Why is there a woman getting raped every other minute, etc., etc.? We can ask these questions, and that's why there is so much scientific research, because we're asking questions when we're trying to find the solutions and the answers. But still we find, with all this modernity and all this technological advancement, still there is death, disease, old age, and birth that causes so much suffering. We are still suffering, we are still lonely, we are still unhappy. With having thousands of friends on Facebook and Instagram and LinkedIn, we internally, when going to bed, some of us feel, wow, does anybody care to see how I'm doing? Do I really have friends, or is it just for showing off? So there is something lacking, and that's lacking part is the soul part, because soul is nourished only by something spiritual. The spirit soul gets happiness from something spiritual, and that's Krishna, and that connection is called yoga. When we get that, then we are happy, regardless of we are rich, poor, happy or not, or good looking or not, Indian or American, doesn't matter. When we're connected to our spiritual source, we are happy. That connection can be Jnana Yoga, Karma Yoga, Bhakti Yoga, Ashtanga Yoga, but Krishna is referring more specifically to Bhakti, that connect with me in devotion and love and service. And thus, you will not be touched by these exterior things. And even if you don't achieve perfection, I will help you so that you can start where you left off, of this birth. So this transmigration of soul, and there is karma that passes on from one birth to another birth to another birth. In fact, even Jesus Christ was asked this question. He was sitting on a rock and there was a blind child. Jesus Christ asked, whose fault is it? Is it the child or is it the parents that the child is blind? And his apostles, his disciples, they had different answers, and Christ said it's the child's fault. Of course, in the Bible, a lot of the mentions of reincarnation and karma has been very strategically removed by King Constantine. King Constantine actually put all the bishops of the time in a church, and he said, you're not getting out unless you remove every mention of reincarnation and karma. So that was all removed from the Bible, but there is still, in the current Bible, you can see that there is a story where Christ asks this question, and that indicates towards past life. Why is it the child's fault the child is born blind? Because in the past life, the child must have done something to be born in this way. Now, there are scientific proofs also of reincarnation. There was a professor at University of Virginia, Professor Ian Stevenson. He had composed 2,000 documented cases of children having memory of their past life. And there are many documentations as such which were not really proved to be true. But in this case, there was actual proof. He would take these children back to where they said they belonged to in their past life and showed them. And these children would be able to recognize their own pictures on the wall. They'd be able to recognize their husbands and wives and their children and name them and the house and all of those things, proving that there is something that modern science doesn't know and cannot even touch, because this is not tangible. This is something beyond what you can put under a microscope. And so he and generations after him, Ian Stevenson and his future generations, they have been researching on reincarnation. You can read all about it, and there's proof that there has been many cases where children remember their past lives. There's also hypnotic regression. In hypnotic regression, a hypnotist can take you in a sleep stage where they deep down get into your subconscious mind and can take you all the way back through your memories to the point when you were a fetus in your mother's womb, and beyond that to your past life and the life before and the life before and the life before. This is generally used as a therapy for people who have fear, like claustrophobia or fear of fire, fear of heights, etc., different kind of phobia. And generally they don't find happiness when the doctor says you're just crazy, you have a problem, move on with life. But going through hypnotic regression, when they find out, oh, I died in a fire accident, that's why I'm scared of fire, or something happened which is why I'm scared of closed spaces or heights, etc., that gives people a closure that, I see, this is why it's happening. So hypnotic regression, anybody can actually go to a therapist and try it out, and you will be able to dig down into your past and figure out who you were in your past life, if that's something of interest to you. But the point is, reincarnation is not just something that's spoken in Bhagavad Gita, but many cultures around the world, many religions around the world do believe in it, and there is also scientific proof to show that there is something that happens between one life life and the next, and the soul never dies, as Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita. So karma is what brings us forth, what pushes us with time. So as the time keeps going, it's our choices that we do that bring forth the next circumstance, and then we make choices and the next circumstance, and that's how a chain reaction is going on. But Krishna is giving us something more. He's saying, look, if you do something good, you get a good life. If you do something bad, you might get a bad life. But either way, you're going to suffer. Even in a very rich family, or you're born in even, let's say, higher planets, where let's say you're a demigod, still there is problems like death. You still die, and nobody likes to die. There's still envy, jealousy, hatred. There are problems from other living entities. Actually, there's 3 kinds of problems that specifically are happening when we have a material body. One is caused by other living entities. That means bad boss, bad wife, bad cousin, bad husband, bad children, whatever it is, other living people, or bad driver, etc. Then there are the demigods. You have the higher universal controllers who cause rain, who cause thunder, who cause different snow. So we face different problems with climates and volcanic eruption and earthquakes and all of those things. And then there is the problems caused by our own mind and our body, right? So these things will continue to be imposed on us as long as we have this material body. So Krishna is saying that whether you do good karma or bad karma, end of the day, it's all bad. So we are looking for liberation. What does liberation mean? The karma, the activities that we do, this is called karma bandhana. That means it ties us to a knot where I like to do this, so I'll continue to do it. Or my tradition says I should do it, so I'll do it. I get some satisfaction from it. And so thus at the time of death, Krishna says, whatever you think, whatever you desire, and whatever your karma is, that's what gives you the next body. So accordingly, we create our next body, our next journey. But if Krishna says one thinks about me, of coming back to me, I bring them back out of this material world, out of this temporary birth, death situation where you're in the kingdom of God, or Vaikuntha, Golok Vrindavan, where there is no death, where you are constantly in association of God, where you don't have a material body. You are in your original spiritual form, and you constantly interact with God, and you constantly interact with other associates. At least 90% or 98% to be specific of the souls are said to be in the spiritual world with Krishna. 2%, just like there are criminals who are in the prison. So 2% is only here in this, manifestation of the material world. So we belong there. Just like a fish out of water can never be happy. Even if you put it in liquid, vanilla or liquid ice cream, it will not be happy. It needs to be in water. So we need to be connected with Krishna. And then we can act in Krishna consciousness. And Krishna says, if you work for me, there is no good or bad karma. That all gets burnt away. That all gets diminished and reduced and eventually totally extinguished. And when you have no karma, you don't have to take another body. So karma, gone. Desires, you want to be with Krishna. Great. Guess what happens at the time of death? You go back home to Krishna. That's the purpose of our life. To live a god-centric life and to die a god-centric death. That way, we go straight back where we belong, our original home, with God Himself. We will continue this into chapter 3 thereafter. Till then, have a wonderful time and ask me questions below. Again, this is a book of question and answer, so I want this to be interactive. Comment below, be positive, be inquisitive, and I'll try my best to answer your questions. Thank you very much.